Well, welcome to another unboxing. And you can tell pretty much right away, seeing His Majesty the King, that this is going to be a Swedish beauty that we're going to be unveiling. And I personally purchased this machine as an original owner machine from a collector out in Missouri, or Missouri as some people pronounce it. So we'll see how I did. I used my normal vetting process, 80 plus questions, looked at pictures, looked at video clips. Machine will need some work, but I think I've got a really good foundation to start with. So let's see what kind of Swedish beauty I ended up buying to add to my personal collection. That sure was a beautiful piece, wasn't it? I guess they're not done yet. They're kind of teasing us a little bit with what sounded like an ending, but it's not. All right, let's get into this unboxing, and I'm also going to be covering a couple of other things. You might notice those 2 foot controllers to the left there, along with some drill bits. So we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Okay, now I think the song is officially over, so I can say, wasn't that a beautiful piece? Deja vu. Let me get some other lights on. So that particular piece was called Nocturne, and the next one is called Wandering Soul. Wandering Soul. I felt like piano music today, and y'all know that I enjoy sitting down to the piano whenever I've got the opportunity. So this is going to have kind of a piano flavor to it as far as a live premiere. The first thing I'll tell you about this lady by the name of Julie that is out in Missouri, as many Missourians say it, is she's really new to this business. Not new to sales. She's been involved in sales a long time, but we talked quite a bit about packing objectives. And I guess I'm a very poor communicator. I'm not in the ranks of Ronald Reagan, who was a great communicator, because I can tell you just my first impression from the outside of this box is not, oops, I just took out the space shuttle, is not a favorable impression. Hold on just a second. And if you haven't seen the premiere yet, once you see the premiere, this space shuttle will make a little bit more sense. Let me set it over here. Hopefully I don't knock it over again. So what I was beginning to say before I started knocking things over is Julie and I talked a little bit about packing, and her initial response when I explained that I did unpackings on video, she said, "Oh, how exciting, how cool, blah blah blah." I said, well, it's only cool if you've done a good job. If you haven't done a good job, then it can be a little bit of a calling to the woodshed type thing. And I think we might spend a little bit of time by the woodshed, Julie and me, because look at this box. I'll do it with one little pinky. That is not the sign of good corrugation. Let me just say it that way. And, you know, this is not an accordion as far as I know. Now, yes, I'm fairly strong, but I'm not applying a ridiculous amount of pressure to be able to do this. So, first impressions, not favorable on Julie's packing job. But we'll see what we find inside. You never know. Those vintage ferries that travel with our machines and safeguard them night and day around the world. Hopefully they were on duty. Hopefully. Well, that's the end of that other piece that I just played, which is also lovely. I know very few people that do not enjoy some really good piano music. Or if some of you grew up watching Beverly Hillbillies, as the character of Granny would always say, some piano music. So this next one is called Hopeful Freedom. Hopeful Freedom. So we've got some of the airbags that I have such mixed feelings about. We've got a little patch of them right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. This one on the end has a little bit of air left, not much. This one is flat. This one is flat. This one's got a little bit of air, and this one is flat. So out of all of these airbags, we only have the one on the end and this one that are good. So 2 out of 5 that actually held their air. But again, as flimsy as this box is, look at that. Whoa! As flimsy as this box is, I'm not surprised that these took the brunt of it. And these are not nearly as good of a choice as regular bubble wrap, because if one chamber breaks, you lose 1/6, or in this case 1/5. You lose 1/5 of your protection. If 2 break, you've lost, well, you know the math. And it just takes a little bit of an impact, and then all of a sudden you got no protection at all. So I would strongly recommend the small bubble wrap like you see me use, because then you've got multiple airbags that are, you know, if one gets popped, what's the big deal? It's like 1/50th or 1/100th of the protection, versus these big airbags where if you lose a little bit, you lose a lot. So here we have another little cluster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. 5 again. We've got popped. That's pretty much popped. It's got a little bit in there. Good to go. Popped. So again, the majority of them are popped, and you know, had a few more popped, you lose everything. So, but again, what do they say? You can take you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Here we've got another one that was affording protection towards the front of the real super flimsy box. And out of these, all of them are popped. So no protection whatsoever for the contents. And I'll just continue to go down the line. One good, all the rest of them popped. Some other sort of an airbag. This is probably a little bit better design. Some pop, some good. All this is a plastic bag. It's filler. It's not doing a thing in affording any protection to this Swedish beauty. More of these airbags. Here we got a big cluster of them. Big old cluster. Good, good. Popped, 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 popped. Almost all the way popped. Almost all the way popped. Popped, popped. Good, 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 good. Popped. So you can see, I mean, it's totally, use these things, it's just totally hit and miss. You'll have a little bit of protection in some of the areas. The other ones, like this little cluster right here, all of them are popped. So you can raise the odds of the protection considerably if you use the smaller bubble wrap, because it's going to afford a lot better protection and a larger preponderance of protection as well. There's one of those $1.50 words, preponderance. I like words, don't you? Although I get them wrong quite often. So here we got another little cluster. I should say a pretty good sized cluster right here. So we've got good, good, popped, 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 and popped. So out of this entire line of this airbag bubble style, whatever it is, we only have 2 out of all of this. Out of all of this that actually are still providing any protection upon arrival. Those are not real good odds. Those are not real good odds at all. That's for sure. Different type of airbag. Again, we have basically, and this is called EB Flex by Pregis, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. We've got one that's intact, one that's popped. The goal is that when that reaches the destination, whether it's coming to the workshop or whether, you know, if I were using this type of packing stuff, which I never would, the goal is when it arrives at the end of its at the end of its journey, that all of the air protection that you put in there, the bubble wrap, etc., should be intact. That means that outer shell, in my cases I use, as you know, I use a plastic 18-gallon tote as an outer shell of protection. And then I create many, many layers on the inside of that protection to safeguard the treasure of that machine. And you may have just seen, if you do Facebook as well, you may have just seen the posts on Facebook where Mary Klein was unwrapping that Betsy Ross machine that I shipped to her as a consolation prize. I'm just going to bring this up real quick. You may have seen her do that, do some of the unboxing and still shots. And if you expand those and make them real big, you'll see that packing material survived the journey. And that's the whole goal of packing material, is it shouldn't be something that, it should be prepared to sacrifice itself if it has to protect and safeguard the treasure that's enclosed. But you shouldn't be losing 70, 80, 90% of the packing protection by the time it reaches the end of its journey. The majority of that packing material should be intact. Instead of having 20% left or 30%, if you really squeak it up, you should be having about 80 to 90% at a minimum. That means that you've done a good job and you've created enough layers like an onion to safeguard that machine inside of there from all of the bubble wrap basically being consumed, like this stuff. So keep that in mind as you're creating layers, that they are designed to sacrifice themselves for that machine. Kind of like the Secret Service protecting, a dignitary, the president or whoever. They're prepared to sacrifice themselves for that protectee that have the responsibility for. But if you don't have enough Secret Service agents around that protectee, around that dignitary, and one of them goes down, God forbid, and you don't have a backup on a backup on a backup, they use kind of a triangular zone, protection zone type thing when they're protecting someone. You got to get through multiple layers before that protectee would ever be vulnerable. Same thing in packing a treasure like this that's equally as valuable as the president or anybody else, in my opinion. You got to create multiple zones of protection so that if the enemy, which is the booms, the bangs, the bumps, and all the other stuff, I always create these words, booms. If all of those other zones are compromised, you still have a layer of protection to keep that treasure safe. So, does that make sense? Kind of a weird correlation, Secret Service to our packing method, but it resonates with me. Hopefully it does with you as well. All right. So that last one was called Hopeful Freedom. Now we're going to try Sweetly My Heart. So there have been other corrugated boxes where I've really had to, I've had to use a cutter like this to get through them. But in this case, it's one of those super duper, one pinky again, one pinky. You get the idea? Julie is a very nice lady, but she needs to step up her game as far as packing, because this type of box is like a toilet paper box where you're shipping something that, okay, how do you damage toilet paper? Realistically, in shipment. So they don't have to be super heavy gauge as far as the corrugation. This is not the type of box to use in shipping a sewing machine or anything else that would be something that you would consider to be fragile. So I don't need a cutter. I can just go that easy. And it shouldn't be that easy to do it, no matter how strong or not strong you are. So you can see our cases inside. The way that Julie has this box orientated, this is the top right up here. So she's got the machine riding sideways. And unless she has padding inside of here, that is a really, really bad choice. The whole idea of this case, in the way it's designed, like a clam style shell when you have it positioned properly, is that it's going to allow that movement, a little bit of upward movement with the machine, but it's going to allow very little movement from side to side because there's much less padding design from side to side. She's shipping it sideways. So that's another concern as you're looking at how this case is positioned in here right now. Now this is the bottom of our box right down here. I'm going to remove this case and we'll see what packing material, if anything, survived the journey on the bottom of here as this box was being dropped on cement floors, thrown in the back of vehicles that have metal beds. And yeah, there's a case around the machine, but the case is only going to be able to afford so much protection. Secondly, the case has value itself as well, so you don't want to be taking the case for granted and just say, oh, it's only a case, I'm not going to protect it. What we should be seeing when we, rewind a little bit more, what we should be seeing is a much heavier gauge corrugated box, something that isn't going to create splits on it. This is one finger, by the way. One finger and one thumb, just so I can grip it. You know, it's cheapy cardboard. And a good cardboard box only costs a couple bucks more. So let me take this case out. We'll take a look at how the packing material survived on the bottom, and then we'll continue the unboxing. So on the bottom here's, I think you can see in the shot pretty much, this is what our bottom protection is comprised of. We've got some of this green bubble wrap, most of which seems to be, because it's got smaller chambers, kind of like I've been talking about, not quite as small as mine, but it's got smaller chambers, which is going to distribute the weight of that case and machine better. It's going to make the bubbles less prone to pop, because again, you're distributing that weight over a larger field of protection. And if one or two of them pop, no big deal, because on each one of these sheets, and I'm only guessing, you've got a field of 2, 4, 6, 8, about 12 across and about 10 to 12 down. So probably, well, 10 times 12 is 120. So somewhere around 100 little bubbles is what we're looking at as far as a field per layer of this stuff. So that's quite a bit of protection. And then she's got a smaller piece down here. This type of bubble wrap is used mainly to like put something inside of it, and then it's like a little bag. When the bubbles get this small, if you can see that in the shot, when the bubbles get this small, for a machine that weighs 40 some pounds, it's basically useless. Unless you're going to wrap, what this would be used for is if you were to wrap the foot controller with this stuff, and then it's inside of the case, and then you cocoon the machine inside of the case as well. This has a purpose then, but as far as the bottom barrier where it was placed down here, not a good application at all. Not a good application. And here we have more of that stuff right here again. Great for putting something inside and using it like a bag, which is really how it's designed. It's designed as a bag that affords some protection with little bubble wrap, but not for bearing the weight of the case in the machine. So again, you can have the right tools, but you can use them wrong. You know what I mean? And again, here we've got the box, which is just, I don't want to hurt Julie's feelings, but it is a classroom, and we got to be honest. It's just junk. If you're going to ship me some toilet paper, or if I'm going to order toilet paper or something else from China, which is where this is from, and it looks like originally this would have been used to house some sort of a speaker, is what it says on the box. I hope that speaker arrives safe, because the box corrugation is just, well, you already know how I feel about the box corrugation. That's not a good choice. Not a good choice at all. All right, so let's take a look at this Swedish Beauty case, and this was just underneath the case. This is actually part of the manual that's been torn off, and I don't know why it's not inside of the case. That would make sense to me, but it was actually between the bottom, or I should say it was between the side of this case, because again, this case was shipped like this, and when I just turned it from sitting properly to the side, you probably can't hear it, but you can literally hear and feel that machine shifting inside of this case, which right away tells you what. Type it in the chat if you would. Type in the chat if we can just gently, and we're not even hitting this thing like a courier would, as they're throwing it from one vehicle to another, as they're shifting it around in a some sort of a warehouse type place, as they're moving it around from one place to another in a warehouse, and they're tossing it here and tossing it there, and that bottom that has that real crummy bubble wrap in there is absorbing as much of the impact as it can, as this thing is riding sideways. But when you tilt a case like this, if you haven't typed it in the chat yet, and I'm not looking anyway, you shouldn't be able to feel any shift at all inside of this case when you're moving it to the side like this. Listen real close. Get the idea? That's the machine. That's the machine bouncing against the edges of the case, which tells me right away, even before we open this, that there is either no padding on the inside, the machine has not been cocooned, or the padding is so insufficient that the machine is not being protected to any degree at all. And when you're shipping it like this and you've got crummy packing, that machine is going to be bouncing up and down and getting dropped again on cement and metal. And because there's not adequate padding on the inside to immobilize it, that machine sideways is going to be bouncing up and down like this in the case. Not a good scenario. Setting that machine up to be damaged upon arrival. And again, I'm hoping that somehow those vintage sewing machine fairies filled in those spaces that Julie did not, and we have a machine that is not damaged. Because again, I bought this for my own personal collection. I'm the customer. I'm a real nice guy, but when I do business with people, I expect them to carry their own weight to, to meet the expectations or exceed them. And at this point, Julie is from a letter grade in this classroom. She's right around a C minus, real close to a D. So let me put on some more music and we'll open this case and see what we see. So that again was called Sweetly My Heart. This next one is called Allegro, and I know we've played Allegro before, so it's going to sound familiar to you if you're a regular follower on this channel. If you're new to the channel, it might sound familiar because maybe you've heard it on the radio, maybe you have a CD of it, who knows. But all of these again are classical in their genre, or genre, I think is how it's pronounced, and they're all going to have a lot of piano in them as far as instrumentation. I'm gonna get a drink real quick. My throat's a little bit dry. Down in the workshop I have a dehumidifier so that the environment stays real dry and the machines are not prone towards rusting or anything like that. And the humidity level, I've got like a percentage on my dehumidifier. It's only been in the 30 range. That's real low. That's real low. That's like touch something and get a static shock or something. So maybe I need to turn that back a little bit. When we get into the thick of winter, I don't run the dehumidifier a lot because there's so little moisture in the air as it is. All right, well, keep your fingers and toes crossed. Let's see what we find. At least the hinges work. But again, if you're shipping something like this, what should you have done in packing this in relation to the hinges? Type it in the chat if you would. I'll get another drink while you're typing some sort of a response. What are you going to do for the hinges? And you saw me do this recently on a tiny scale with Mary Klein's Betsy Ross Model 707. Well, if you type something in the chat to the effect of, I'm going to wrap around that entire case and anchor those hinges down so that that hinge doesn't somehow in transit pop open and then we've got a vulnerable machine. Plus I'm going to stretch wrap all the way around the case to totally cocoon the case as well, and inside I would have cocooned the machine as well. If you typed all that, you get an A+ in the class today. Anything even close to that. But the whole idea is that we would stretch wrap and then strapping tape around the case like this on both sides to immobilize those hinges and also to take stress off of them as well. So that if this thing is getting jostled around, those hinges are not having to, you know, grit their teeth and try to keep that case closed. That stretch wrap is going to anchor it down so that those hinges can relax on the journey and have the confidence that that stretch wrap has their six, as they say out on the street. It's got their back. You know what I mean? So, and I gabbed so much, we just ran through another song, Allegro. So here is number 9, Esther's Waltz, and we played this multiple times on the channel as well. It's a beautiful piece. All right, here we go. So we've got some sort of padding, which is miraculous considering what I was hearing inside of the case. But we've got an accessory box that clearly is not protected adequately. So again, airbags. I don't know if you can see it in the shot because I got the screen facing the wrong way. One popped, one intact, 50% protection. And we want at least 80% protection, right? So now we got bobbins, not protected, not wrapped in any way. Accessory box, not padded, not wrapped in any way. Not padded on the inside either. How do we know that? Julie, my dear, my fellow collector friend from the great state of Missouri, you're down to a D in the class, dear. No idea what these are, but we'll find out. They may be cams. One of the things that caught my attention about this listing, and I actually had a friend that pointed me towards this listing originally, and said it looks really good, it's got a lot of potential. So I kind of pursued it, got into communication with Julie, and one thing led to another, and I eventually ended up getting this machine. So here we've got combination. I'm glad I grabbed that carefully. Look at what was kind of tucked into that packing material, and I see a bunch of other ones as well. So if you happen to get a machine from a seller or shipper, just be aware that they may not have exercised what I would consider to be fairly common sense and made sure that there are no needles or other real sharp things, razor blades, that you as a customer, when you're unpacking that machine, could potentially get hurt on. Because if they sold you that machine in an environment where you can provide feedback, like a Facebook Marketplace or an Etsy or an eBay or a Bonanza or something like that, and you get stabbed by a needle or sliced by a razor blade because they didn't, exercise just a little bit of common sense and make sure that that was not going to be something that you would be exposed to as a customer, what kind of feedback are they going to get? What do you think? Yeah. I've just, all my life I've been in business in one form or another, and certain things just are common sense in my opinion. But some folks, they look at the world a little bit different than I do. All right, so again, that was number 9, Esther's Waltz. And the next one I'm going to put on is number 7, Alone with My Thoughts. Alone with My Thoughts. So another airbag, which for the most part is all popped. It's got just a little tweak of air left in it, just a tweak of air, but the other side is all flat. So again, I don't recommend the large airbags, folks. I don't. Now here, finally, is what I would consider to be proper packing material for a vintage sewing machine. This is going to be almost identical, very, very close to the bubble wrap that I use. But instead of just sticking it in the case as a filler, it's got to be what? It's got to go around that entire machine, right? And it has to be strapped down with strapping tape and then anchored with, strapped down with stretch wrap and then anchored with strapping tape. That's kind of what I meant to say. So this approach, right material, wrong application. What else do you notice about my friend Julie from the great state of Missouri? She's got the machine in here backwards. You can't see that in the shot. Let me zoom in a little bit. No, you can see it. You can see it perfectly fine. So what does that tell you about this very, very new individual, experienced in business, experienced in selling, but probably as a new collector of vintage sewing machines, she doesn't have what? She doesn't have knowledge. And knowledge is one of the most important things in our space of vintage sewing machines. That's why we have this classroom, is so we can learn together, right? So in that sense, even though I'm not happy by the fact that she lacks the knowledge of even how to put the machine properly in the case, it's perfect for the classroom because it teaches all of you, if you've never had a Swedish Beauty before, how it's supposed to go in the case, which is exactly the opposite of what you're seeing. More of these larger airbag type things. Two of them, well, this one's got a little bit of air, this one's flat, this one's got a little bit of air in it, this one's totally flat. So again, you know, these are not the best thing to be using, because if you lose a little bit, you've lost a lot. Also, we have a machine that is going to need some patina work, but we've got a plug for the power cord just bouncing around in the case, floating around in the case, which means it can go up against the paint and do what? Yep. I mean, it's almost like a switchblade on the street or something like that. It's going back and forth with the motion of the transport of the machine, and it's got a huge likelihood. So what should have happened to this cord is it should have been wrapped in stretch wrap, anchored down with strapping tape, and then attached to the rear of the machine to immobilize it. So Julie was at a D. Okay, I'm going to stay with the D for right now, but we're getting really close to a D minus. Here we have more of the right material, the right type of bubble wrap, but all it is just tossed into the case. It's not anchored to the machine. It's not affording any real protection. It's acting as a filler. And based on what I demonstrated when I had this still closed up and it was on its side like it was transported, and I rocked it from side to side and you could hear the movement inside of that case, is this doing a good job even as a filler? If you typed in the chat or in your own mind you said, oh hell no, I think you're spot on. It's doing basically nothing. It's ornamental, it's decorative. So, all right, Julie, you're down to an F, my dear. You're down to an F. Sorry to deliver that little bit of news. So, and I'm seeing a light hanging down, which is telling me that we're probably going to find some more potential damage. All right, I'm going to carefully try to pull this machine out. First thing you can see, I think, in the shot is a light assembly that is dangling. Which means it's broken free of the housing. Should be up in there. But instead, it's dangling down. The other thing that we can pretty much see, if you look at that bulb real close, is that in all likelihood that bulb is shot. So any of you that have been customers of mine, and again, I'm not perfect. Let me say that again. I am not perfect. But the level of attention to detail that I try to apply from the beginning of the time that we first start talking about a machine until I ultimately premiere it and then ship that machine to you, the level of attention compared to other folks is off the charts. And I would never, ever send a machine to someone, even if it wasn't a machine that I sold them, if it was a machine that I serviced for them, I would never send them back a machine with a light like this. Not just the fact that it's broken, but also a bulb that basically is so far gone, if it even works, that it's not going to really do anything at all to light that bed or that needle for the customer. You got to be thoughtful in business, folks. You got to be thoughtful. You've got to be intentional. Julie has a lot of opportunity to improve in that area. A lot of opportunity to improve. This particular machine is a CI21A. A CI21A. And this is actually, from the outside, appears to be the correct case for this machine, but it's not. Because the CI21A would have come in a case that had the two compartments in the rear left-hand side, one for the accessory box, one for the foot controller. And I did buy this machine knowing that there was not a working foot controller with it, so that's not missing. Don't panic about that. I knew that. And I have an extra foot controller in the workshop, so that was kind of my backup plan. But this is not the correct case for the CI21A. It should have those compartments, and you'll see when I move the machine out of the way a little bit that there are no compartments in the rear of this machine case. And I've got the screen pointing the wrong way, but I think you can readily, yeah, let me come out on this shot. We're too close in. Yeah, you can see there's no compartments in there. And that's a small matter, but the reason that Husqvarna went towards adding those compartments that would be over in this area right over here is to provide a safer transport for that machine when you're carrying it in the carrying case. It gave you a small compartment where you could pretty much immobilize the foot controller, which is fragile, and you could also pretty much immobilize the accessory box, similar to this, back there as well in its own little compartment, and they wouldn't be just placed in there haphazardly as you were transporting the machine around in the case. So this isn't a showstopper, but my expectation when I buy a CI21A is that it's going to have those compartments so that it's more self-contained. Does that make sense? The case overall appears to be in good shape. There's a little bit of distortion over here on the far side, probably where, because of the very poor packing, it got banged around. There's some rust on the case as well, but I've seen that quite a few times. So I'm going to set the case on the ground, and we'll take a closer look at this machine that has had a fairly rough journey from the state of Missouri to here. And I am going to come off the tripod because I'm seeing some other damage on the machine as well, which is a very difficult to find upper tension control unit. So let's come off the tripod and get a little bit closer and kind of check out this CI21A at a much closer distance. And I'll put on a little bit more music while we're doing that. Okay, the next one is called Number Two, Remembering Her. So we're actually missing part of the light assembly is what it is. This is going to attach to a drop down, and then it's going to be hinged and it's going to rock up and down like this, but there's nothing that it's attached to right now. So that's problem number one. And I'd have to go back and look. I mean, again, if you take pictures and it's like this, let me see if I can do it again. Isn't that funny when you intentionally try to do something? It won't do it, but when I kind of tucked it up there, it kind of stuck up there. So we know that it can stick up there because I did it just a little bit ago, but it's not doing it now. But if those pictures that Julie presented with the machine and it was stuck up there at the time and she didn't show a shot like this, then I wouldn't have seen that that piece was missing. I might have an extra piece like that, but it's a little bit irritating still that it's not there. We do have a bobbin case. That's good. There's actually a bobbin in it. And the rest of the hook and shuttle system seems to be intact. See what's stuck underneath there? Because it wasn't... We actually have a presser foot jammed underneath the arm of the sewing machine, between the arm and the bed. Now what's going to happen when I try to dislodge that from there? It's very likely going to scratch the paint patina, isn't it? You got to be very thoughtful and very intentional in business. This is not a good example of it. That's really, really jammed in there. Very, very jammed. And unfortunately, when this free arm is disassembled, this piece here can slide out. So I may be able to squeak it by, but it's still going to be metal against paint when I slide it out. So hopefully when I get to that stage I can go ahead and do that. But this is the biggest disappointment right here. Look at this upper tension. There's a chunk of plastic out of it. And this particular type of upper tension, these are really hard to find. I don't believe I have an extra one in the workshop, so I'm going to have to source one in order to make this complete. And yes, the upper tension will work with that chunk busted out of there, but that's not what I anticipated. Fairly good spring movement. Again, kind of like the bobbin tension being around 3 ounces. There are some people when they disassemble upper tension unit like this, because you can set this spring as far as the level of tension that it has, they ratchet it way up there. And again, as you're sewing, this spring is going to be going, as you probably have seen when you're sewing, probably can do it better from this side, the spring is going to be going up and down at the rate of sewing that you're sewing. Sounds kind of redundant, doesn't it? So the rate of sewing is, as you increase the rate of sewing, this spring is going to be moving faster. And again, the purpose of this upper tension release spring is during that cycle of sewing is that needle bar is going all the way down, coming all the way back up and completing its sewing cycle. And this is moving in conjunction with that. It's going to, for a microsecond, release the tension to allow that thread to advance through the needle into the material and allow that stitch row to continue. If this isn't functioning properly, or if you've got it with too much resistance as you've set it, say you've taken this apart and you've reset it and you set it too high, you're going to have either issues with thread breaking, or you're going to have issues with distorted stitches or missed stitches. So this also, kind of like that bobbin case tension which is normally set right around 3 ounces of pull. This should be in that same range where you've got a good kickback response, but when you're pushing it down like this, it's not excessively hard to push it down. This feels like it's probably set a little bit too high. So here inside of the faceplate, and I'm feeling a lot of resistance as I'm trying to move that balance wheel. A lot of resistance. So we've got something happening on, most likely on this end of the machine, with either the long belt or the shorter belt coming off of the motor, or the bobbin assembly itself, where we do not have free motion. It is real sticky and nearly stuck. If I try to turn this full circle, it is not. Listen. It actually only made the sound once, but there's something binding in there, something catching. And those of you that are real new to this channel or new to Swedish Beauties, this again is going to be where you control your presser foot pressure. This is going to have both a little disc like this, that if you rotate it to the rear, it's going to increase presser foot pressure. If you rotate this disc to the front, it's going to decrease. And then you also have this little tab right here with the teeth on it, that if you push it in, got to get the right angle. Oh, it's actually jammed. Oh, there we go. Finally released. If you push it in, you're going to see that this little disc thing that we were just touching rotates down. It pops down. And at this point in time, when we released it like that, right now we have no presser foot pressure whatsoever. Only the sheer gravity weight of the presser foot bar, which allows us to do this, to move it very freely up and down. So in theory, if you're looking to sew something that is thicker than the clearance that you would naturally have with your presser foot, because this model, this CI21A, is not going to have any hyperextension. Hyperextension is again where you grab that presser foot bar on the back. Where is it? Up there. As you grab that presser foot bar on the back and you try to push it up a little bit higher, like you're going to go outside of the normal boundaries of flipping it up, and there would be a little bit of a give that would give you 1 to 3 millimeters more clearance underneath the presser foot. The CI21A does not have that. So if you have something super thick that's thicker than what will clear the feed dogs and the presser foot, you can do that release on here to make that drop down. Push that presser foot up, get your material into place. Look at the difference. There's normal. Here's when we're extending it beyond the boundaries. Look at it from this angle. So you can imagine if you've got a super thick quilt, or you've got a little bit thicker garment material or whatever it is, you're working on a project and you're like, I can't fit it underneath there. You hit that quick release, that little tooth thing right here, that sucker drops down, then all of a sudden you can grab that presser foot, slide that material into place, let her go, and then in order to re-engage it, because if you don't re-engage it, you're going to start sewing and you're going to have a mess, because you're not going to have basically any presser foot pressure whatsoever. So you put one finger on here, your thumb on the bottom, and you pinch them together. Might have the wrong angle. I'm going to do it like this. And sometimes this gets gummed up in there and it sticks. Let me try to manipulate that a little bit. Kind of loosen it up. Hold on a second. Let me set the camera down. There we go. So that is, the machine needs a deep cleaning. What I did is I kind of pushed this up, and then I kind of manipulated this at the same time so it would catch. So now at this point we do have presser foot pressure, because this is in the lock position up. And now if we lower our presser foot with that real thick material in it, we're going to be able to resume sewing. But again, you got to get a feel for that presser foot lever, because as you're raising and lowering that pressure foot lever, if you're not feeling quite a bit of resistance at this stage as you start to come up, then you very likely, if you're sewing at that level of thickness where we had to push that presser foot bar up to fit that real thick material in there, then you're going to want to look at making an adjustment on here to increase that pressure. And you just rotate it in increments, do a little lift test on that presser foot bar, see how much resistance you're getting. Keep going up until you feel like you have adequate pressure down. Because again, the simple rule is thicker materials, you need to increase the presser foot pressure so it's pressing down on that material more against the feed dogs, and it's feeding that through evenly. If you don't do that, you're going to have skip stitches, you're going to have all kinds of bad things going on. And in its current position, we would not operate the machine Y as it is right now. Why would we not push on the foot controller right now? Type it in the chat if you think you know. Take a close look at that. So if you type something in the chat to the effect of, you never ever run a machine unless you have a buffer between the feed dogs and the presser foot, because it's either going to dull the feed dogs or it's going to scar the bottom of that presser foot, and then when you try using it for regular sewing applications, that barbing or scarring on the bottom of that presser foot is going to be catching the material and causing all kinds of challenges for you. Then give yourself a gold star, because that's the correct answer. The only way we can operate this machine right now without material there is to raise that presser foot up so that those feed dogs are free flowing. They're not touching the bottom of this metal presser foot attachment, and they're not going to cause scarring. Either this or this bottom part is not going to cause these feed dogs to become dull. Does that make sense? So yeah, Julie right now is at an F. I'm hoping to redeem her and get her back up to at least a passing grade. And you can see again on the CI-21A, we do have that stamp on the inside of the faceplate. You might remember on John Smith's Type 21, there was nothing there. It was just the faceplate, and they made them both ways, coming out of the Husqvarna factory in Sweden. Depending on the model and the class, you'll either see that or you won't. So, well, with all of the disappointments up to this point, at least this seems like it's adjusted pretty well. And again, there's just a single little screw that holds that on. So if you decide that yours is too loosey-goosey or too tight, just realize that that's real thin gauge metal there. It is metal, but it's thin gauge metal, and you might be better off taking that screw out, making the adjustment as far as the contour of that, how it's going to meet with the case, and then screw it back on instead of trying to do it when it's mounted, because then you're going to be stressing the threading on there, and you could either crack this or you could crack that. So and you can see on this particular cover for the feed dogs that have the throat plate and everything engineered into it, we do have markers on here as far as seam settings when you're feeding material, so you can feed it more evenly, whether you're looking for, you know, say a 1-inch, a 2-inch, or a 3-inch type seam. So very thoughtful design, very helpful to the customer. This is not helpful to me as a customer, is it? That is, I'm pushing on it pretty hard. That's not going anywhere. That's not going anywhere. So at least these plastic controls over here, while they are disgustingly dirty, again, it doesn't take much to wipe these down. I can even do it with my finger a little bit right now. Again, thoughtfulness in doing business. And this, again, if you're new to the channel, this machine does take a series of different cams, potentially A, B, C, D, E. If you've got, if you've hit gold, you got A, B, C, D, E. But this is how you change between the different cam settings. So you just pull this little slider out, and right now it's locked. And the way you release it, if it's locked, is you zero out your stitch width
take it to 4. That's probably all we have to do because it was already down on 0, which is where I would normally take it. And when we bring it to 4, now this should allow us to slide it. Assuming it's not damaged in some way. Try it again. There we go. Took 2 times as a charm. So now we're able to finally move it. So this is kind of what I'm doing. I'm taking it down to 0. I'm moving it to the next position, the next position, the next position, and then I'm going to set my stitch width back at 4 again to lock it in place. So now if we try to move it, it may move, it may not, but it's not going to move as freely. So just every time you move from one point to another, from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, take just a second, which is all it takes, is take your stitch width down to 0, make that movement, which will be real free because there won't be anything jamming it up, and then take your stitch width back to 4 again. So this control here is going to be needle position, left needle position, right needle position, center. And again, that needle position is only going to respond when you are at 0 on the stitch width. So if we try doing it right now, if I come out on this shot, and I've gotten questions like this, I think Hans has as well, where someone says, I'm trying to, I saw your video, Scott, I'm trying to change my needle position. See, it's not doing a really good job of responding. Wait, switch that, reverse that. I meant to have it over here. Too little coffee. So they're, at any rate, they're not on 0. That's the point. Oh, jeez. Like I said, I'm not perfect. They've got their stitch width set on 4, 3, 2, or 1, and they're trying to change needle position, which is not going to work. See how the needle position, I'm changing it up here. Not doing anything. And that's simply because that zigzag function has needle swing. So it's overriding our ability to say, you know, we want to make some other adjustment on the needle position, because the needle position is going to be moving with the movement of the needle swinging back and forth. If that makes any sense. I probably totally confused you now. So if you're set on 4, if you're set on 3, if you're set on 2, if you're set on 1, then this control right here is not going to do much of anything as far as adjusting needle position. When you get all the way down to 1, it's going to let you do a little bit more, but pretty much only to the left. It's not going to do much of anything if I move it to the right. So if you want full control over it, take your stitch width rather, all the way down to 0, which is where it's at right now, and then you're going to have full control over that needle position. Okay, so I kind of stumbled over my words and thoughts a little bit there, but you have the idea. If your stitch width is anywhere from 4 to pretty much 1, it's going to limit what you can do as far as needle position. If you put it on 0, it's going to have a lot more flexibility in potentially manipulating that needle position. Yeah, I finally got it. I finally got it. So up on top here, by process of elimination, since I've already said this is stitch width down here, you know that this is going to be stitch length up here. And on pretty much all of the green machines, you're able to take the stitch length all the way from 4 all the way down to pretty much, I mean, almost down to 0. If you take it down to 0, you're not going to be getting any material feed at all. So, I mean, if you're doing some of the decorative stitches that you can generate by moving this little slider, you're going to be wanting to be somewhere between probably 0.5, right about there, and right about in that range. So that would be 0.4, probably right around 0.3 is about the lowest I would go. If you go down to 0.2 or 0.1, you might have some major feed issues with that material. For most normal sewing, you're going to be somewhere between 1 and 4. For decorative ornamental type sewing, like the cam generated stitches that you'll generate, I usually go right around between 0.5 and 0.4. So between 0.4, 0.5 is where I would be normally if I'm using one of the stitches from here. And obviously to use these stitches, you can't be on 0 with stitch width. You'd have to be right around over on 4. I think that's even what the book recommends. And then here you've got obviously reverse. You push it in, and I don't know if this works yet. I haven't had it on the workbench to work on it. And it looks like it's pretty jammed up. Let me see if I can move that and get a little bit of freedom or movement from it. Yeah, so it just pushed in. See how slowly it's returning? So that is a combination of dirt, varnishing, and it may require an adjustment, but more likely it's filthy and gummed up and dirty. So that's something that can be resolved. See, even with my repetitive motion, it's starting to loosen up without even doing any maintenance on it. And as I stumbled recently in that Premiere, and I was describing that little lever on the front of Mary Klein's Betsy Ross Model 707, and I described it as something to manipulate the feed dogs for freehand embroidery. You can see when I push the reverse, it does the same thing. I'm pushing the reverse, and watch what happens to the feed dogs. See? Changes their orientation, so they're feeding the opposite way on their rotation cycle to move that material backwards instead of forward. And on this model, the CI21A, it is not going to have the locking feature like some of the green machines have, where when you push it in, it's a 2-stage. When you push it in, it stays in, which this one won't. But imagine that when I let go of it, that it's still in, and then you have to push it a second time to release it. It's a 2-stage release. So if you have one of the green machines and when you push it in, it stays in, but as soon as you push it again, it releases, that's by design. That's not a maintenance or a mechanical issue. And then we have this tiny little this tiny little silver tab on top of our stitch width controller. And again, that's for stop and start points for buttonholes. I don't believe I've ever actually used it, but it is something that's engineered into the machine. Oh, what else do we have? So on the rear of the machine, we'll just kind of look at that a little bit. This is obviously, when you're depressing that reverse, you'll see how this rotates the pitman arm. This is the pitman arm right here. It's going to rotate that pitman arm to allow the mechanics of the machine to operate 180 degrees the opposite way. So that's reverse, forward, reverse, forward, reverse, forward. All it does is pitch that pitman arm down, and then there's a slight pivot point way down below that then takes that shaft and rotates it the opposite way down at the needle. Or I should say down by the feed dogs. We've got our main cleated belt, which acts as a timing belt more than a drive belt. But there's going to be 80 plus cleats on there that interface with a cleated pulley here and a cleated pulley on the bottom to give you positive traction down the main shaft. And then over here you've got the long belt. You've got the long belt that right now it's just a standard V-style belt. Feels like it's a little bit gritty on the back, a little bit glazed, which is an indication it probably needs to be replaced. It's not as bad as some of them I felt. And then we've got a shorter belt behind this housing right here that's going to go over the same pulley on this side as the long belt, and then we've got the other end of that short belt that's going to go over the pulley coming off of the motor over here. And then you saw how we were manipulating that slider on the front, the silver one. When we manipulate it, got to release that. When we manipulate it, it allows us to move it in and out And again, you want to have it all the way in position 5 when you're removing a cam so that you can clear that housing. Don't try removing a cam when it's in here, because when you push this down, it's not going to allow you to push it all the way down to clear the plastic of that cam, and it's going to create a headache for you. Or you're going to break something, one of the two. So this is where you want it to be when you're removing it, which we can certainly do right now. But first of all, I'm just going to show you this rocking finger right here. Not this, behind it. That's what's going to actually read the bumps of that cam. This right here, this little piece right here. It's going to have a little finger on there that makes contact with the contours of that cam. And as it's moved back and forth, it's going to translate into stitch output. So in this little area right here on the machine, I can tell you that there's close to 30 service points on it to make sure that all of those mechanics work properly. Not just right now, but long term. And that's really where my 126 step process for a Swedish Beauty, it plays out very quickly when you're talking about one little area like this having nearly 30 service points. So I'm going to push this down now, and then I can take this cam out, which you can see on the camera is cam C. And then some of these other little packages we're going to open, in all likelihood, are going to be some of those other cams that came with this machine. That's kind of what I'm suspecting, these little packages over here. Or they're going to be in this accessory box, which also has damage to it as well, as you can see. So I'm going to set cam C right over there. The only other thing I'll tell you is that right now, we took that cam C out. You never ever want to operate a Swedish Beauty when it doesn't have a cam in the back. Never ever operate a Swedish Beauty like this when it does not have a cam in the back. Because what that cam is going to do is it's going to set swing boundaries for that needle. And without that cam in there, there's a high likelihood you're going to be able to roll the dice for a while, but that needle all of a sudden will go out of its normal field of operation and it will strike that needle plate. And it will either break a needle and scare the wits out of you, or it's going to potentially damage that needle bar. So never, ever, 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 ever operate a Swedish Beauty like this without a cam in the rear. That even includes the straight stitch. Even though the straight stitch by design doesn't have any needle swing, don't roll the dice on that. Just pop a cam in, which is very easy to do. I can even do it with one hand, I think, holding a camera. So you can do it with two hands very easily. Get that back into place. You just want to kind of rotate that cam a little bit until it slides into, rotate that cam, let me do it again, rotate that cam a little bit until it slides flush, and then release that little arm, and then you're in a position where you can move that back and forth again. And I can just leave that in there. It doesn't have to come out. I just wanted to show you how to take it out in case you're brand new to Swedish Beauties. So there's our nomenclature plate. It's going to tell you a bunch of things about the machine. It's going to tell you the model, submodel. So this is a CI21A, which again, from the research that Hans has worked with me in doing, whether it has what appears to be a CI or whether it has a CL, that is going to translate into simply meaning class. So it's a class 21A. Made in Sweden. Then it gives you the needle size, which is a 15 by 1. It's telling you that this is rated for the U.S. electric circuitry, 110 to 120 volts. And then finally, way over here, where you can see 1,5, that's telling you that it's 1.5 amps. Which, as I said recently when I traveled to Sheboygan, if you haven't seen that premiere, it's kind of fun. I go into basically a consignment store and I pick up a machine that I purchased. And I explained some of these things to the owner of that shop who had the machine on consignment from the original owner, because to someone looking at this nomenclature plate that hasn't been on this channel in our classroom, this is going to look like Greek to them. They're not going to, I mean, they can read basic things, but all this other stuff, they don't have a clue. And this owner of this consignment store obviously didn't have a clue either. And his initial impression was kind of interesting. Again, if you haven't seen that premiere yet, watch it. It's really cool. I take a trip to Sheboygan. We're away from the workshop. It's just very interesting. I explained to him, because I tell him what this means. And he goes, 1.5 amps, that's pretty low, isn't it? I go, no. Some of the $12,000 to $14,000 long arm quilting machines that Elna, Husqvarna Viking, which is not really the real Husqvarna Viking anymore, and some of those other major companies that put out these long arm quilters that are tens of thousands of dollars, most of those machines are only going to have about a 1 amp motor. Some of them have a 0.8 amp motor. So when you have a machine like this that has 1.5 amps and it's engineered as a Swedish Beauty, you can kick some major butt with a motor like this, especially once I've optimized it. So your power cord is hardwired. It's coming right off of here. You plug your foot controller in here. This is your on-off switch for the light, which we don't know at this point if the light even works because it's kind of broken free of the housing. Maybe it will work, maybe it won't. And that's pretty much a walk around the machine. These two bolts right here you can take off because there's an additional 15 to 20 service points from here to here in the machine as well. So this entire panel can come off, which allows you to have a lot of access. Plus you can do a better cleaning of these little portholes right here. And these portholes right here are not just sexy design in the machine. It's in conjunction with where that light would be and generating a lot of heat, so it's allowing some of that heat to escape as well, so that that heat doesn't build up. If you saw that recent premiere that I did relating to foot controllers, you can see where the Swedish were not always thinking ahead of the game as far as allowing air movement, air exchange, and to allow heat escaping. Here they did a brilliant job with this little piece that attaches to the rear of the machine that also has this door on it as well, where they're going to allow a lot of that heat from what would have originally been an incandescent bulb like this, which, I mean, you can cook an egg with these things when they get the full heat. So it's right in this area right here. It's going to allow that heat to escape through these portholes, which is thoughtful design on the part of the Swedish. Very thoughtful design. All right, I've been kneeling long enough. I may have to have one of you come to the workshop and pick me back up. The other thing I kind of skipped by, I didn't really touch on it, is on this side of the machine we have, again, if you're new to the channel, you're new to Swedish Beauties, we have a couple things. One is we have more ventilation for the motor, which is going to be over in this area. The motor's basically right underneath here. We've got ventilation for the motor to allow heat to escape. Same thing on the other side. We've got more ventilation. But this is also going to be a portal where that motor running is going to be sucking everything in. So these get real filthy. So that also is an area that you'll want to consider if you do a complete deep cleaning on your own Swedish Beauty. You want to clean these as well, because otherwise all that gook and grime and grease, and you know, if you have your machine anywhere near your kitchen, it could be even on another floor, and that grease gets into the air and is moved around, it'll stick to that, it'll get sucked into the motor. And there's close to I'd say about almost 40 service points inside of this area as well. So it adds up quick. It adds up real quick as far as the servicing of the machine. And this is also going to be a wonderful feature on this particular Swedish Beauty. You've got this tiny little tab, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to get close enough for you to see it. You got this tiny little tab right on top there. You see that? Part of the design of this bobbin winding assembly is that when you slide a bobbin over, it depresses that little tab right there, which through a spring action on the inside that you can't see, it's going to disengage the drive down to the needle. And this is the automatic feature that oftentimes is referred to. I don't know if it says automatic on the front of this one or not. I don't think it does. But a lot of the Husqvarnas will say Husqvarna Viking automatic or something like that. That's what they're referring to right there, is that auto clutch disengagement. Just by sliding a bobbin on, it disengages the clutch. You can wind that bobbin, and then when you take that bobbin back off, you'll hear a little click, and then that motor will, or I should say the drive will re-engage, and then you'll be back to sewing again. And then you can also, if it's working correctly, and I don't know if this one is, you can also pull this assembly out, and it's not going to happen. This is kind of like John Smith's was when it came into the workshop. He's a real smart guy and very knowledgeable, and he was pulling on that sucker for all he was worth, and it wasn't going to budge. So this slow gear right now is not functioning correctly. This assembly should pull out, and then when you want to disengage it, push it back in, and you're back to normal sewing. And again, what the slow gear is designed to do is give you maximum control over the rate of speed of sewing without metering it through a foot controller like this. Because if you try to meter speed through a foot controller at slower speeds, kind of like my friend Annette was doing down in Cypress, Texas, that flood of electricity that's looking to escape by operating the foot controller at a normal rate of speed is trapped in here, and then all of a sudden it starts superheating. That foot controller can get so hot that you can actually feel the heat radiating through it. And if it gets too hot, it will actually cause the capacitor and the resistor inside of this foot controller to fail. And when something like that fails, what happens is one of two things. It either doesn't work at all unless you push it all the way down. I'm trying to get my orientation here. If the capacitor or the resistor fail, you're going to get one of two results. It's only going to work if you push it all the way down, because then this little mechanism right over here, makes actual physical contact between copper and copper. When you push it far enough down, it does. See how it makes contact? So then you have to go like pedal to the metal for the thing to do anything if one of these two will fail. Or when you plug it in, as soon as you plug that plug into the rear of the machine, if one of these two has failed, the capacitor or the resistor, what's going to happen is the machine will start running right away without even depressing the foot controller. And the solution is, I might as well show you the solution right now. The solution is you can remove the capacitors, similar to this foot controller right over here. This foot controller had capacitors at one point. It also had an additional wire running up the right side, like a lot of the foot controllers do, because that's a feed to the capacitor. Actually, you can see it right there. Yeah, it's coming to the bottom of this ceramic inlay. But once you rewire it without the capacitor and resistor, which is not recommended because they do serve a vital purpose, but at the same time, in order to have function with a foot controller, you then have to wire it like a standard foot controller, and one of your leads is going to connect to this point right here. And some of these, if you can imagine, are going to look more like this, where you have multiple screw points. You actually have 5 altogether on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you can see this one in the middle right here is in conjunction with this field of copper that is part of this assembly. So that's where one of your leads is going to go. The other lead is going to go to this far left one right here, wired just like you see this one right here. So you have lead 1, lead 2. This lead feeds this area. This lead is going to feed this area and then go into this stack. And then by depressing it, you're going to complete your circuit. And then the foot controller will function as it should. Some folks, if they don't have a setup like this with only 2 screws and they have 5, they'll sometimes wire one of these leads coming in to this screw, and then the other one to this screw, or the other one to this screw. And what they have then is they have a foot controller that sometimes will work, sometimes doesn't. Or again, it'll be almost like you still have the bad capacitor resistor in there, and when you push it down, it only engages when you go all the way down, pedal to the metal. So wiring is really important. I've covered it a little bit on this channel. I don't cover it a lot because there's a risk involved, and I don't want to put anyone at risk in getting a missed message or something like that. But this one's pretty doggone straightforward. If you're rewiring this after removing the capacitor resistor, one of those leads is going to go to this zone. The other one is going to go to this zone that's going to feed up here to the stack. And then when you push that, you're going to complete that cycle between those two, and you're going to be able to regulate speed. And I'll show that to you. I'll show you what happens with, assuming that this motor actually runs. We don't know if it does. Or I could show you on a different machine. Kind of turning it right now just to see if it'll even, we don't know if this is even going to fire up. I'll give it a try, otherwise I can grab another Swedish Beauty to show you. And the other thing I'd shown recently on another Premiere, and I'll just cover it real briefly, is on the original, some of the original Husqvarna foot controllers, if you can imagine a metal back being on here like this one right here. Metal back goes on the back of there and kind of closes that. Maybe I have that upside down. I believe I do. No, I had it right. I had it right. It's just I don't have it centered properly. So normally when this is in place, you've got a metal backing that is locking all of that heat inside of the foot controller. There's no ventilation on the side. There's no ventilation on the top, on the facing top either. There's no ventilation on the bottom because there's little or no air movement that can move underneath there because that's closed. When that cap is, when that cover is on the back, that's all closed off. See that? So you get a huge buildup of heat in there, especially if you're trying to do slow sewing and you're not using the slow gear, but you're trying to meter it through the foot controller. Again, there's going to be a flood of electricity coming into that foot controller that's trying to escape the foot controller and make its way to the motor. But when you're trapping it in there with something like this and the rest of the plastic housing, which is like 5 millimeters thick, and it's trapping all that heat in there, the result is you're going to be superheating the inside where all of those delicate components are. And if you continue to operate, you know, with those conditions, you're either going to blow out a resistor or a capacitor. I mean, if it gets super extreme, you could even crack this ceramic housing that goes around that centerpiece of the foot controller. So it's serious stuff. It's serious stuff. So what I showed, blah, 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 what I showed in that other Premiere is I showed that because when you're operating a foot controller in the slow speed and you're trying to meter it through the foot controller, you're only going to be pushing it down probably about 10 to 15%, probably right around in that range. You're going to be really trying to slow that machine down if you're doing free motion quilting. So you can see the one hole that I've already drilled, and I did that on the other Premiere, is going to allow air exchange. It's going to allow air to go into the foot controller. It's going to allow heat to escape. And what I suggested in that particular Premiere is you want to drill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes starting with a real small drill bit like this. Where's the camera? There it is. You want to start with a real small drill bit like this to begin to port that hole like this. Start a with a real small drill bit, probably about a 0.5 millimeter in diameter. And then you go to a larger drill bit, which is going to be closer to about probably 2.5 to 3 millimeters. Just drill the same hole, keep making the hole bigger and bigger. And then finally go to a drill bit similar to this, which is going to be about 5 millimeters in diameter. And you finish off that hole, and then you do the same thing with the other 4 holes on this side. You're going to do the same thing with the other side, and then you can even put some holes on the top as well that are going to be close enough to this edge, but further enough away from this edge that you're not going to potentially crack that plastic. And that'll allow ventilation on both sides of the foot controller. Ventilation here, and it'll cause that foot controller to run dramatically cooler if you're going to be doing free motion quilting with your Husqvarna foot controller like this. But again, you want to make sure that that hole is far enough down from the top that you're not going to be cracking plastic there, but it also has to be high enough up that when you imagine that you're actually using that foot controller in the 10 to 15% range, that it's still going to be above so that it's not below here, then you're not going to be getting any air exchange. Does that make sense? So I think that's a good hack. And actually, again, as I was talking to Annette and she was describing what challenges she was facing, that's the hack that I came up with. We kind of were collaborating, exchanging ideas, brainstorming, and I said, what about if we do this? And so then I shot her a little video clip of what to do, and now I did a full video premiere after that showing the process in greater depth, which is what I'm kind of re-explaining to you now. So hopefully that's helpful. When someone is getting a Swedish Beauty, there's a wide range of activities that they might be looking to do with that machine, and if we can do a little adaptation like this to increase the ventilation for that foot controller so that that owner has more flexibility to use it as they want and with longer durations, then that's a win-win for everybody, because this doesn't do anything at all to compromise the integrity of the foot controller. It simply allows greater air movement, air exchange, and heat escape as well. And you can see they got the message, the Husqvarna folks got the message a little bit, because this is where they started right here on one of these original foot controllers. Notice there's no ventilation on top. All of a sudden they got to this level, and somehow they'd gotten feedback. Wait a second, I think I just showed you the opposite. Oh no, I've got a totally different, at any rate, I've got a totally different foot controller. What they eventually did is they added two little ports on some of the later models of the foot controller, right on the crown of the foot controller right here, to allow that heat to escape. Neither one of these foot controllers have any ventilation designed into them whatsoever. Later models did. They had a little bit of ventilation on this end of the foot controller right up top. So it took them a while to figure that out, and the Swedish are very, very smart, and eventually they got the message, but they never did evolve to this level of creating little ventilation points along the bottom edge that stays open pretty much all the time unless you're going pedal to the metal. Then it kind of disappears into that housing. But yeah, we like to improve things, don't we? Let's not be content, as I say all the time, let's not be content with mediocrity. Let's look at a design and say, what can we do to improve it? And that's what you do right there. I think I was going to mention something else, but I just totally lost my thought there as far as what I was going to mention. At any rate, it'll probably come back to me. So that's what I would recommend anyway. Even if you're not going to be doing free motion quilting, and you're going to be doing slower sewing, maybe doing a lot of tight edges and stuff, and for that application, either your slow gear doesn't work, like this one doesn't work right now, or you're looking for a different flow or something like that, and this breaks your stride in some way. It just doesn't feel comfortable. Creating those extra portals along that edge right here is going to give you the flexibility to do slower sewing for longer durations. All right, I hope I didn't just totally bore you. Hopefully you found that helpful. I hope you found it helpful. That's part of the reason I wanted to share it. So, all right. So I think we're at a stage right now where we can try to goof around with this machine, and I'll show you again. This foot controller over here has a failed capacitor. No, reverse that. This foot controller right here is a failed resistor. And so when you plug it in, it's going to start running that motor right away, even before you depress the foot controller. This one has the capacitor, the resistor removed, and it's been wired to function without them, and it should function properly. So let me go back on the tripod, and I will show you what that looks like. And also plug my camera back in so we don't have this thing go. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. That should be pretty good, I think. Put a little bit more music on so you don't have to just listen to me talk. So we did number 2, Remembering Her, and now we're going to do number 6, In My Dreams. And again, I don't know this machine from Adam at this point, other than the questions and the vetting that I did from a distance. So I'm going to plug it in, anticipating that nothing weird is going to happen. You know what? Before I do that, I'll play extra careful. Better careful than careless, right? See what happens. Well, we know our light works. This again is our switch for the light. So at least we know the switch works. So the first thing I'm going to plug in is this foot controller that has a failed resistor in it, which will allow this machine to basically act as if there's a complete circuit even before you depress the foot controller. You'll see what I mean shortly. Oh, maybe you won't. Oh, I bet you I knocked that wire off when I was goofing around with it. Yeah, I surely did. The wires are not screwed down right now inside of here. So I had a wire connected where it was allowing it to complete the circuit. Right now it's not. And it probably is not going to do a thing. Yeah, it's not going to do a thing. At any rate, normally when the resistor fails on this, when you plug it in, the machine will start running right away. I bumped the wire so it doesn't do that. But we do have electricity in there right now. And we know that if we use this tester, it'll react. It should react. Yeah, I'm not getting any response from it right now, which might also be a sign that we've got an issue in here too. So, all kinds of interesting discoveries, aren't there? All right, let me move this one to the side. But again, if you ever have a foot controller and you plug it in and the machine begins to run immediately before depressing the foot controller, it's going to indicate that the resistor in here has failed. So the resistor is what's going to allow that electricity to be held back until you open the floodgate by pushing this. And if it fires up right away, then you've got a bad resistor. So again, you can wire it like I showed you on the other foot controller to do a bypass. We'll try this other foot controller, which I know I've wired correctly and works. So if this doesn't work, then we know we probably have some issues going on either with the wiring or the motor. Let's see what happens. And you can't in the Premiere obviously smell it, but I'm smelling that this motor is in some trouble. So I'm not going to run it anymore, but you can see that we've eliminated the issue, at least at this point, with a wiring issue or something being broken inside of this housing right here, because this foot controller did respond correctly. And this again is the foot controller that originally had a capacitor and a resistor in it, and what I did is I did a bypass connecting to the 2 points that I showed you so that we could use the foot controller normally and have a range of speed without the benefit of the capacitor and the resistor. And the capacitor and the resistor by design are designed to, almost like an electronic foot controller, it was kind of the beginning of that, allow you to have a little bit more even flow. Have you ever had a foot controller where you push on it and you push on it and push on it and finally it kicks in? These were designed to give a little bit more of a metered, even response to this foot controller when you were using it. Again, thoughtful design on the part of the Swedish in having those as a buffer so that you had a little bit even, steady rate of operation using this particular foot controller. So you lose a little bit of that when you do a bypass, but for most sewers it's not going to be dramatically different. You know, the only other thing I didn't demonstrate when it was plugged in, because the other one is not giving us a response, but on this one we should get a response as far as it being electrically charged. And that again is something I want to really emphasize. I've shown you both of these being plugged into the machine with the machine being electrified with that power cord and the back is off of them. This has a potential element of danger to it because right now this foot controller is charged with electricity. And so if you make the mistake, if you have a big ring like I do or something like that, you make the mistake of somehow touching the wrong thing, inside of that foot controller, when the back is off and it's charged and plugged into the machine like it is right now, you could get a good shock off of it, because it's electrified not only when it's depressed and completes the circuit, but it's electrified even when it's not being depressed as well. As you can tell, this is my electricity detector. You hear that? That's the equivalent of saying warning, 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 warning. So if you have something similar to this, and we can do it another way just as well, kind of go down to those contacts that I'm making contact with right now. Now, you're only going to get a response from one of the posts, which is going to be the hot lead coming in. It's going to be the one on the right. You go to the one on the left, you're not going to get a clear response. You're not supposed to get a clear response. So I'm touching that left lead post right now, no response. I'm touching the right post now, and I'm getting a response. If you wanted to get a response from both of them, just to make sure that, let's say you wanted to make sure that your foot controller is good, you're pushing the foot controller, you're not getting any response, you don't know if it's the motor, you don't know if it's electrical wiring, you don't know if it's the foot controller. The way to eliminate the foot controller as the issue is to get a response from the left side, which we're not right now. All we would have to do is depress the foot controller, because this is going to complete the circuit on that left post, where this is already the hot lead coming in. We're already getting a response from there as far as electricity flow. So I can kind of get on my knees a little bit, and I'll push this down. Now if we touch the left one, our circuit is completed, and we should be getting, I'll have to check that. Normally you would get a response from the left one. We're not getting a response from the left one right now. Let me check over here. Oh, I see what it is. It's because we're not using the capacitor and the resistor. It's going to detect it differently. Okay, that makes sense. So now we're running. We're trying to run. Yeah, that's what it is. That would be the case if we had it plugged in with the capacitor and resistor wired that way, but since we have it wired differently, we're not going to be getting a response from those. We're only going to be getting a response from this electrical field up here when the foot controller is depressed. And again, watch where I'm putting my hands on the outside of the plastic housing. See that? No response when it's running. Then I release it. So it's telling us that the way we have it wired right now, when you complete that circuit, you're not going to be detecting electricity the same way up in this field as you are down below. So, and again, it's because we've modified this foot controller in removing the capacitor and the resistor. Make sure I shut this off, otherwise the battery's going to go dead on it. So I'm not going to go real deep on the electrical stuff, but just kind of showing you some of the ways that you can check. If you have a machine that's not running, you can check to see whether or not the foot controller is the issue or whether or not it's going to be a wiring or a motor issue. So this is a machine I can work with. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this. And now once you've unplugged it, it's no longer obviously electrically charged. So you can go in there with a proper solvent for cleaning up this copper and all of these electrical contacts. You could also insulate some of these electrical contacts as well, as I've shown in some of my shots on Facebook. And make sure that it's all cleaned out, and then put that metal cover back on, presumably after you've ported some holes along the edges. If you do 5 here, 5 on the other side, and then say 3 on top, you're going to have a total of 13 holes that are approximately 5 millimeters in diameter to allow that heat to escape and to allow that air movement into the foot controller to wick some of that heat away. As I had explained to Annette when we were on the phone chatting through some of this, it's really the equivalent of a computer and the microprocessor that drives that machine, and the fact that if you don't know this, microprocessors inside of machines get super duper hot. And so what they do is with that microprocessor on the top of the stack, where it's going to be moving information through the computer and everything, it's basically going to be the engine. They put a fan on top of that to suck that heat away from that microprocessor so that it doesn't burn out. And that's kind of what we're doing with these holes on this foot controller, is we're trying to allow some of that heat to escape. We're allowing some of that ambient room temperature to go into one of those 13 holes to keep that foot controller cooler so that it doesn't cause that capacitor or that resistor to fail on your foot controller. All right, hopefully some of that is helpful. If any of the stuff that I've covered so far is helpful, just so I get your feedback, because I value your feedback greatly, would you put either a thumbs up, a smiley face, type some sort of a comment in the chat just to say, yeah, this is good stuff. This is really helpful stuff to help us understand our machine better. Do that, would you? Because that way I know that covering it had value. So, all right. So let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this, because I haven't gone through it yet. We're getting a good response right now. There's no sparks, there's no fire, there's no smoke, which is always a good thing. But now we're going to look at some of these other little packages and just see what else Julie sent in her very poorly packed package. I didn't even mean to do alliteration right there, and I actually pulled it off. That's kind of cool, huh? Poorly packed package. We can actually use that somehow in future premieres. Is this a PPP package, or is this whatever the opposite would be? A well-packed package. WPP. Is it a PPP or is it a WPP? Yeah. I probably will forget to do that, but maybe I won't. Okay, so let's first of all look in the accessory box, which, like the upper tension and the light assembly, as I already showed you on camera, has a crack on it already, which is kind of a bummer. And if you've never seen one of these before, they're basically 3 compartments. You've got the lower compartment where most of the accessories are going to go, where the cams are going to go. You've got a mid-range compartment on top that you're going to be putting bobbins and maybe some attachments. And then you've got the cap on top that just kind of covers the top. And the cap is what's damaged here. So let's see what we have in here. Take the cap off first. And all we have in here is one bobbin right in the top of there. And you can see how this is kind of set up. Well, you can if I actually zoom in on it, you can see it. You can see how this is kind of set up, where you've got those tracks on the back of the compartment, the accessory box, where you can put up to, what is it, 6 bobbins, and they fit in there very nicely all the way across. So you'll have one bobbin in the machine, and then you can have 6 additional ones in your accessory box. And then these compartments over here are for attachments. This also, you can put additional attachments in there, and then this separates from the bottom. And then down here you have a combination of space for cams, and you have a combination of space for screwdrivers and needle threaders, and they even have another attachment piece down here that's too long, that's going to be used as kind of an edge guide of sorts. So all kinds of goodies. And then you have the cams, which I wasn't absolutely sure, and this person wasn't absolutely sure which cams I was going to be getting, but I am very pleased if I'm seeing these correctly. So on the back of the machine, you already know that we have cam C. We had taken it out, we put it back in. Then we have cam C in the machine right now. Then we have cam A. We have cam B that we just found in the bottom of this accessory box. Again, we have AB right there. We have C in the machine. Remember me talking about Annette Stover and how when she and I started talking that I did not have a cam A, and so I ended up giving her basically a cam B, a cam C, and a cam D. And D's and E's on these black cams are like absolute gold. You can't find them anywhere. Even my friend Hans, who you know very well as a monitor / editor on this on my Facebook business page, he couldn't find a cam D over in Norway, right next to Sweden. And so I recently mailed him one of my cam Ds. I sent the other cam D down to Cypress, Texas to my good friend Annette, and that was it. That's all I had. But I said, you know what, if you're generous in spirit, it's going to come back to you. Some people call it karma. I call it blessings. So look at the blessing that I just got with this machine. Another cam D. Yeah, baby. It gets better. If you're generous in spirit and you bless others, the good Lord blesses you back. He gave me a cam D, but better than that, look at what he gave me. A cam E. So with this machine that has some challenges that came from Julie out in Missouri, I still received a blessing. Number one, I can work with this machine. Number two, I received a full set of Husqvarna cams. I'll change this shot a little bit. Yeah, I'll just go over here because they're black against black. It's like impossible. So in the back of the machine, we have cam C. Down here, we have cam A, B, D, E. Folks, that is call Brinks. Call Brinks. You saw the one premiere, if you follow me faithfully, where the alarm was going off because I tried to get into the vault where we lock these cams up. Hans told me offline that he probably is looking at getting a vault for his cams as well, especially once that D cam arrives in Norway. Talking about buying like a fire safe or something like that to lock his cams in, and it's not a joke. I mean, these things are impossible to find. Do a search right now on the internet. Type in something like Husqvarna vintage black cams or whatever you want to search by. Check eBay, check Etsy, check Facebook Marketplace, check Bonanza, check any of those places. You're not going to find them. They're not out there. But I am so thankful that I did move forward with this deal, not even knowing exactly which cams were going to be included. I knew there were a number of cams being included, and that right away has intrinsic value for me because these cams of any letter have incredible value. But again, the boss is always watching, and I'm talking about the big boss up in the clouds. And I told y'all when I was generous in spirit and I gave that D cam to Annette and I gave the other one to Hans, I said, I'm not even worried in the least. It's going to come back. There you go. So be generous, be kind, be giving. Don't hold back things. If you see somebody with a genuine need and they can't meet that need on their own, not that they're lazy, but they just can't meet it. They're in a circumstance where you've got the ability to help them. You've got the ability to be a blessing. Be a blessing because the boss is always watching. And all I did was give a couple of D cams away, knowing that the real impossible cam to find, and Hans has one of them, is that cam E. You never find a cam E ever. They're impossible. They're not impossible. When you put your heart in the right position. So this will be a fun machine to put in. It's already officially in my personal collection. It'll be a fun machine to match an appropriate foot controller with it. Maybe one of the two that you see on the left there. get this machine operating correctly, address the lighting issue, address the upper tension issue, address the slow gear issue, and those are just things I know about right now. There's probably other things as I go through my 126 step process that I'm going to discover as well. There certainly will be other things that I discover beyond that. And we haven't even gotten through all the packaging yet. There's other packaging apart from this accessory box that had all of these incredible cams tucked away inside of it. Cam B, Cam A, Cam D, Cam E. Hans, if you're salivating right now, grab a cloth, my friend. Grab a cloth. But Hans already, and Bill is the same way, and I know Sunny is as well. Sunny's our newest moderator, and I'm hoping to do an interview with her soon where you'll have a chance to even get more in-depth understanding as to who she is and how incredibly fortunate we are to have her on the leadership team on the Facebook side of the house. So now I'm blessed incredibly with having Hans over in Norway, Bill over down in Kissimmee, Florida, or as proper people say it, Kissimmee, Florida. And then we now have Sunny out in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. So we've got a moderator in Pennsylvania, we've got an editor moderator in Norway, and we have an editor moderator. See, I'm making up words again. You got to keep me on your radar because I make up words and I say them so smoothly and with so much finesse. Usually, you're like, oh, that must be a real word. I mean, this dude is college educated. He probably knows what the word is, and it's not a real word, folks. So Sunny just came on board as a moderator for the Facebook business page. And again, if you're only a YouTuber and you're like, I don't do Facebook, you miss so much. And you can set up a blind account where no one's going to friend you, no one's going to reach out to you. You can set all the settings that way so that you're basically an island unto yourself, but you still have the ability to look at all of the cool posts that pop up on the Facebook page. And traditionally, I've been the only one posting them, but now with Bill and Hans being editors, they can post things just like I can. And they posted some really cool things, like Hans talking about shipping machines, talking about Husqvarna related stuff. Bill posting things about when he was working with the Muppets show. Did you know that? If you didn't know that, you didn't know it because you probably don't do Facebook. Yeah, Hans's incredible things that he shares through his posts. Bill does the same thing as well about his work with the Muppet show. Not kidding. Check it out. And eventually, once Sunny becomes comfortable functioning as a moderator, I will then give her the additional credentials to operate as an editor. And she will be able to do posts as well, because she's got a lot to share, folks. A lot to share. But I never move someone right away into the deep end of the pond and make them an editor, because it's just too much responsibility. As I've said before, you start walking, then you start walking fast, then you start jogging, then you start running, and that's how you set someone up for success. That's how I did it with Hans and Bill, and they are incredible resources now to people around the world, and I want to give that same setting up for success profile or platform or whatever it would be with Sunny as well. So eventually she'll move into that editor role like Bill and Hans already are operating, and then we'll be able to see some really cool posts from her as well. So if you haven't welcomed Sunny yet and you do the Facebook thing, make sure you reach out to her and welcome her to the leadership team on the Facebook business page for Cow Country. Would you do that? I hope so. So let's put on some more music. We will take a look at these other little parcels over here in bubble wrap that were sent by Julie from the great state of Missouri, if you pronounce it wrong. Potato, patata. Tomato, tomata. So that was number 6 in my dreams. And now let's put on number 1 A minor waltz. Number 1 A minor waltz. So let's look at some of these little packages over here. And these extra bobbins that were just kind of in this cool little case, they could have very easily been put into, again, this accessory case, because there are basically 5 very dirty, yucky. Kind of glad that she didn't actually put them in there. Can you see all that dirt in there? And bobbins have maintenance needs as well, if you don't know that. Bobbins and bobbin cases have maintenance needs. So introducing dirt to a bobbin that's going to go inside of the bobbin case, that's going to go inside of the raceway, not a good idea. So thank you, Julie. Okay, you're back up to a D-. You're back up to a D- because you didn't put these bobbins in this filthy case. Okay, I hear you. Julie, you're up to a D. You're up to a D. You're up to a D, dear. You're up to a D, dear. What else do we have in these little doodads here? Oh, we got more attachments, which may or may not be correct for this machine. I'll have to check. And that is the thing, if you ever buy a machine other than from the workshop and you get attachments with it, do not assume that they are the correct attachments for that machine. And if I circle back, I just showed you that little box. I noticed it, but I didn't make a remark about it. There's actually a bobbin in that little box that does not belong with this machine. So don't assume if you get attachments that they're going to work with that machine that you bought. So if you look inside of this box right here, where is it? You see that? Got holes on one side, we do not have holes on the other, and that's where people would assume that this is a bobbin that you should be using. And it might work if it's the right circumference to go into the bobbin case. But this is really more of a class 15 style bobbin. If you're familiar with class 15s, they're going to have all these little holes in there, and they're going to be large capacity. So I do not intend to use this bobbin in this Swedish Beauty. So if you look at this bobbin and for whatever reason you just fall in love with it and you go, oh, I love that bobbin, you send me a personal note that is graciously written, and I will mail this bobbin to you. And those of you that know me pretty well already know that I'm being straight up and serious. So yeah, you kind of look at it facing down. It fits in, doesn't it? Turn it the other way. It doesn't fit in anymore. It doesn't fit in. And again, it might work. It might work. Some of them you can cross-pollinate and they actually work in there, crazy enough. Okay. So that was number 1, A minor waltz. This next one is called number 5, The Day I Met Her. These all kind of have a romantic theme about them, don't they? Number 5, The Day I Met Her. So our first one had some cresser foot attachments. That's kind of cool. Set that over there. We've got another little parcel right here. Let's see what this is. Oh, okay. I don't know why it's not on the machine, but this looks like the light assembly that we needed. Yay. All right, Julie, you're up to, what were you at? You were at a D. You're at a C minus now. Well, maybe you're still at a D because I don't see any screws to mount it. This is what the light is, part of the light housing on this machine. Okay, I'll give you the C. All right, I hear you guys. Be kind, Scott. Didn't you just say be kind? All right, you're at a C minus, Julie. You're at a C minus. Set that right by the other one. I'm just going to double check that the screws aren't in here, because if the screws are somehow hidden in here, then I'll move her up to a C. I don't think so. The screws are so tiny, the little bolt thingies. The day I met her, the day I met her, the day I met her, she changed my life. Ooh. All right, any of you that turned the volume down, you can turn it back up. day I met her. Yeah, I could pull that song off. I might want to gargle before I do it, but I could pull it off. I really do like singing. Most of you know that. What is this one? More bobbins, and assuming they're the correct ones. These almost look like Foth bobbins. I'll have to check these. Foth bobbins, when you look at them on the top, are going to have a real similar profile to Husqvarna bobbins. They're going to be very, very close. And you can use a caliper to measure from here to here. You can measure from here to here on the caliper. You also have to measure the inner hole as well, because while certain bobbins will go into the bobbin case, when you try to put them on the winder mounting post that you slide it over to wind a bobbin might be either too big or too small. Too small, it's going to slip. Too big, it's not going to go on at all. So but I'm going to take these out of there, and I'll just add these to the goodie pile over there, along with our little brush that pretty much is useless because it works a little bit to keep the feed dogs clear and that sort of thing, but not real well. Just double checking we don't have anything else hidden in there. I would hate to get something and then throw it away because I'm rushing through, you know? You know what I mean? You know what I mean. Yeah. So that was a pretty song, wasn't it? Yeah. The Day I Met Her, number 5. Number 5, The Day I Met Her. How about Jesse's Carnival Waltz? We played that several times, I know, on this channel. Oh, I think I see what this is. This is the plastic case for Cam D, for the Cam D that's in the accessory box right now. Pretty sure. Okay, Julie, you're up to a C. Why are you up to a C? Because you actually protected this case. And this is the same kind of case that I sent with Hans's cam to Norway. There were only certain cams that I'm aware of that came with a special little case just like this, with the royal crest on it, for that cam to be stuck inside of it. And this one should be, yep, for Cam D. So Julie's up to a C now. She went from an F all the way to a C. That's pretty impressive. So it's like the broken clock philosophy. The broken clock is right twice a day. Julie's, okay, all right, Julie, we got hope for you, dear. We got hope for you. But again, this is cracked a little bit on the edges. Okay, all right, I'll leave it alone. You got a C for now, kiddo. All right, our last little parcel. Also part of the lighting assembly, with a bulb that has no purpose other than for Christmas. This is not for this machine, but this is for the machine, although it's bent pretty good. Yeah, so, all right, Julie, this shows lack of knowledge, but that's why we have the classroom. And you did include this, and you included this, even though you didn't give me the screws or the bolts for it. So you're up to a C+. You're up to a C+. See there, you guys, I'm not being too rough on Julie. I'm not. You hold students accountable, and then they learn, right? That's the whole purpose of education. Any of you educators watching this right now could certainly put a thumbs up or a smiley face if you agree. You've got to hold students accountable. You've got to hold them accountable so that they want to step up, they want to do better, they want to learn, they want to, yeah, you know what I mean. Cool. So, the next one is called Newsroom News. And I think it's like a newsy flavor, so I'm going to play it and then make a quick announcement, and then we're going to wrap this premiere up. You ready? I want to thank all of you for joining us live for this premiere of this unboxing from the great state of Missouri, or Missouri if you're saying it wrong. This again is a CI21A. It came incredibly with all the cams that this machine operates with. It came not so incredibly with a really mediocre, almost near crappy packing job. But that's why we come to this news channel, is to be informed, to learn, to get excited about being in a classroom. This ends the class. Thank you for joining us again today. Tune in tonight at 10 for more news on foot controllers, sewing machines, and accessory boxes, and box cutters, and some bobbins that are right and some that are not, and part of an owner's manual. We don't know where the rest of it is, and it looks like it may have been set on fire. I have no idea. And all the goodies. Yay for the goodies. The goodies, goodies, goodies. All right, well, stay tuned for other premieres like this where you'll learn stuff new and you have fun. That's what it's all about, right? Yeah. Take care.